All right, joining me now is Beto O'Rourke, Democratic candidate for president and former congressman from the great state of Texas. Mr. O'Rourke, great to have you with us this morning. A lot to get to here, and I wanted to, sir, start out with by getting your reaction to some of the news of the day that we just heard there about the president reversing his decision to not have the G7 summit in his private resort in Doral and move it now to Camp David. What is your reaction to that announcement, sir?
I think this is just another example. The president daring this country to uphold the Constitution, and also trying to normalize the kind of corruption that has become endemic throughout his administration. And it met its match, at least in the court of public opinion. The pushback so strong, the law-breaking so obvious that he had to withdraw. But as you have pointed out before, and I think as we all know, this is only one very small part of a much larger problem of this president's criminality and the need for our institutions, most importantly Congress right now, to be able to uphold the Constitution, to defend this country against this president, and to make sure that we come through this okay. So this is just one of many, many problems that we've got with the administration, but an example of how lawless this president is.
Do you buy the president is actually, as a result of pressure, media pressure and political pressure, some of the criticism over the past couple of days, is the real reason why he reversed his decision about that, given that he's been under a lot of pressure from the media and politicians in the past? He never seemed to have reversed a decision like this.
You know, who knows, right? Only the president could answer that question. But I got to tell you, I think that people are standing up, even if they're elected representatives in some cases. These Republican members of Congress aren't doing the right thing. Their constituents are going to force them to do the right thing. And we've seen examples of this in the past. More than a year ago, the president announced a very cruel zero-tolerance policy on the border, where 100% of children arriving with their parents from Central America were taken from their families, separated, caged, and put into a tent camp in Tornillo, Texas, among other places. And the public response, more than 1,000 people showing up in Tornillo within 24 hours of those kids being placed in that camp, I think helped to form the political will to force the administration to change that policy. Now that tent camp at Tornillo no longer exists. That's just one small, but I think important example of the power of political will and public pressure and the public sentiment, more important than ever right now. So everyone who's out there marching or calling their senators or members of Congress out there on social media, that stuff works, and we got to keep it up.
Let's talk a little bit. You brought up the issue of Congress's oversight in checking the president's criminality here. Let's talk a little bit about impeachment, and then we'll switch on to some of the 2020 issues. It's been, as you noticed, a whirlwind of impeachment inquiry steps taking place. You got 12 subpoenas that have been issued, 4 closed-door depositions, 2 closed-door transcribed interviews, 53 hours of testimony behind closed doors with 6 witnesses. You got a lot more coming in this week, some key ones as well. Do you feel the impeachment inquiry is moving at the right pace, or should it be slowed down and more facts gathered from what you're seeing right now?
I definitely don't think it needs to be slowed down. I think there are many of us who for years have been able to see clearly that the president needs to be impeached. I mean, going back to his candidacy, inviting a foreign government, Russia, to involve themselves in our election, after being sworn in, seeking to obstruct justice, to lie to investigators, to fire the principal investigators, to cover up his phone call with Zelensky, and then out in the open to ask China to involve themselves in this race as well, perhaps in exchange for a more favorable trade deal and a reduction of the tariffs. So I think we have the necessary evidence. I appreciate the deliberate process that the House is taking to make sure that they marshal all the facts, that they present them to the public, that they present them to the members of the U.S. Senate who will be conducting the trial on the president's culpability. But look, the very future of this country, our democracy, the Constitution that every member is sworn to uphold and defend. All of that is on the line right now, and they must pursue their duty. And that includes those Republican members who've got to put this country ahead of their party, ahead of the president of their party, and ahead of their next election. This is a moment that will define America forever.
All right, so to that point, are you at all concerned that if it does move quickly, the way that Senator Mitch McConnell says, if he gets an impeachment, articles of impeachment, let's say by Thanksgiving, that he could try to move forward with, you know, whatever kind of legal process he wants to have at the Senate in terms of a trial, that this thing could be wrapped up by January? The president feels that he's been exonerated by impeachment just as the 2020 race heats up.
You know, my faith is in the people of this country. And though you're right to question the motives of Mitch McConnell, who, when in 2016 was warned about what the Russians were doing to our democracy, chose politics and political expediency over this country, our Constitution, and our democracy. I do think the constituents of those members of the Senate, as these facts become clear to them, will insist on justice and accountability because they understand that the alternative is to set a precedent where some people are really above the law in this country. And the moment that we do that is the moment that we've turned our back on justice, that we've turned our back on this democracy, and we lose this idea of America forever. And I know that the people of this country understand that. They will force their senators, including those Republican senators, to do the right thing. And it gets back to this idea that I brought up earlier, the power of public sentiment and the popular will, and making sure that our voices are heard, certainly at the ballot box in November 2020, but right now on the 20th of October, making sure that all of us are heard in terms of how important this moment is and the fact that we've got to do the right thing while we still have time to do the right thing.
Let me play you, sir, a soundbite from GOP Congressman Francis Rooney talking about considering impeachment. Watch this exchange.
The president was saying no quid pro quo. I'll just give the guy the benefit of the doubt. I was hearing all the testimony at the impeachment hearings, and come to find out there was a clear quid pro quo admitted to by his chief of staff. All this stuff about that we continue to hear more and more about Giuliani, Rick Perry and stuff, creating some rump, non-professional diplomatic channel. I just don't believe in that kind of stuff. And
are there other Republicans who are perhaps open-minded to coming over to your side on this, but aren't saying it right now?
I hope so.
Have they said that to you? Have they talked to you about that?
Not in so many words.
Sir, do you believe the Republican red wall, so to speak, that the president shielded himself behind is beginning to crack on this issue of impeachment? Do you have confidence that, in fact, as you say, the people of this country may put pressure on the Republican senators, but do you believe that they would actually consider this the way we just heard there from GOP Francis Rooney?
I do, because I really believe in this country. When it's all on the line, when the stakes couldn't be any higher, this country will come through, and it always has. It takes us a while sometimes. It can be frustratingly slow. We've seen too much criminality and impunity from this president, but there will be a reckoning. And I think that someone who has mastered the lie, Donald Trump, the obscenity so large and so obvious and so often repeated that we can be tempted to believe it or become inured to it. The counter to that is our faith in one another in this country, our Constitution, and doing the right thing while we still have time to do the right thing. So I think the power of people will be expressed through their representatives, but it's just incumbent upon every single one of us to stand up right now and be counted. There's no waiting for tomorrow or the next election even. The pressure must be applied right now. And I'm seeing that, and I'm feeling that, and I'm hearing that all over the country as I travel the country. People want to make sure that we come through at this moment of truth.
Let's switch gears for a moment, sir, and talk about the 2020 race, and also, again, with some important news coming out of the Middle East, and that is the situation in Syria. If you were the commander-in-chief of our armed forces, what would you do differently than what we have seen the president do in terms of claiming to at least withdraw troops from Syria, not really doing it, just deploying them to Iraq, but what would you differently about the situation in Syria right now?
Yeah, I never would have turned this country's back on our allies, because not only does it dishonor our commitment to the Kurds, who, as you know, have fought on our behalf and significantly reduced the number of U.S. service members that we needed to have in Syria because they were willing to do so much on our part. I would never allow a treaty ally ally like Turkey to go against one of our allies on the ground, the Kurds, and I would never withdraw to the benefit of Iran, of Russia, of Assad, of ISIS, which is exactly what has happened. This president has diminished not only our standing around the world, but our security and our safety as Americans. To renew these alliances and these friendships is fundamental to renewing our strength and our security and our standing around the world. And so that's what I would focus on. I would make sure that we once again welcome the democracies, our treaty allies, our friends, and rethink these relationships that Donald Trump has forged with strongmen and dictators and authoritarians all over the world, whether that is Erdogan, whether that is Putin, whether that's al-Sisi, whether it's Mohammed bin Salman, who's able to kill an American-based journalist with complete impunity and then bomb Yemen back into the last century and into the next humanitarian crisis and disaster. All of this, in large part, is a result of the foreign policy of Donald Trump.
You, sir, drew some criticism earlier this week about making some comments regarding tax exemption for religious organizations. There are some within your own party who disagreed with your position. Let me pose that question to you once again. Do you believe that religious organizations in this country should be denied tax benefits, tax breaks, exemptions if they do not agree to perform same-sex marriages? Or clarify that position for us.
The answer to the direct question that you just asked is no. I see tremendous value in what religious institutions do in this country, not just for their congregants and parishioners, but what they do in our communities. I think of Annunciation House, a Catholic charity in El Paso, Texas, which provides shelter to asylum seekers and refugees, has facilitated the reunification of these separated families on our border. Of course, they should be able to do that work, and of course, any one of us should be able to worship as we please, believe what we like. But the moment that any nonprofit organization in this country offers services in the public sphere, higher education is a great example, or a healthcare clinic or hospital, then they must follow the laws of this country, including the law that prohibits discrimination based on any difference of race, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation, which is the question that I was asked at that CNN town hall. That is a long-standing value, and certainly since 1964 in the Civil Rights Act, a long-standing law in this country. And so I want to make sure that we enforce those laws and that we fight for every single person in this country to be treated with justice, with dignity, with respect, with equality under the law. And so I'm going to make sure that those continue to be our values in this country, that we uphold the law, but that we also respect the freedom to pursue your religious beliefs as you see fit.
Let me ask you, sir, about Bernie Sanders and where you fit in the political spectrum of the candidates that are running right now, because he racked up a endorsement yesterday from Congresswoman AOC here in New York. Let's talk about the issue of health care for a moment and where you stand on this particular debate about Medicare for all. Do you believe in Medicare for all with a right for citizens, American citizens, to retain private insurance if that is what they want? And if so, how do you differentiate yourself from other candidates who've also claimed that stake?
My plan is Medicare for America, which would enroll everyone who's uninsured today in Medicare tomorrow, everyone who is insufficiently insured. And so we know so many who cannot afford their copay or bridge their deductible, they could elect to move into Medicare. But those who have an insurance plan that they like, that works for them and their families, I'm thinking especially of members of unions who fought for, negotiated for those plans, sometimes in lieu of wage increases or other earned benefits, they're able to keep them because it works for them. And so to the goal of universal, guaranteed, high-quality health care, this is the best possible path to achieve it. It gets everyone there, and it respects the decisions that our fellow Americans make.
Let me ask you, sir, finally about some controversy brewing within, if you will, the Democratic race. Former frontrunner, obviously nominee, Hillary Clinton, saying that Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian asset and saying that she could possibly even be cultivated as a third-party candidate. You came out and you actually disagreed with that. Here, let me play you this soundbite from what you said to The Hill earlier.
Tulsi is not being groomed by anyone. She's her own person. Obviously has served this country and continues to serve this country in uniform in Congress as a candidate for the presidency. And so I think those facts speak for themselves.
Is it helpful when you have the former nominee of your party criticizing another presidential candidate in the way that she did?
You know, I think the focus has to be on Donald Trump. If we're talking about the country of Russia, there is a Russian asset in the White House right now. We know, and we all saw it in broad daylight, candidate Trump inviting Vladimir Putin to invade and be involved in our elections, which he did. And then we saw President Trump, after he'd been sworn in on that stage in Helsinki, Finland, defending Vladimir Putin instead of our intelligence community. We learned after the Robert Mueller report, his mendacity, his lies, his pressure on other witnesses to lie on his behalf, all for this country. And obviously the list goes on. So I think that's where we as Democrats, really we as Americans, need to be focused right now, holding that president accountable, making sure that the truth comes out, that we follow the facts as high as they go, as far as they lead, and at the end of the day, that there be justice, rule of law, and a continuation of this democracy and this great country. All of that is on the line right now.
Fair enough, but sir, let me just go back to the original question. Did Hillary Clinton make a mistake by going after a candidate that is running for president from within your party? I noticed that Democrats are very quick to criticize when President Trump smears any of them and they defend their candidates, but in this case, it is coming from within the party, from a former nominee, without any evidence. So I'm giving you a chance to answer that. Did she make a mistake in going after Tulsi Gabbard?
You played my response just a second ago, and I stand by that response. But again, I think I could play into this false media narrative that seeks to pit Democrats against one another over a spurious allegation, or we could focus on the fact that there is a Russian asset in the White House right now doing the bidding of a foreign power against the interests of America. I think that's the focus for this country, and that's where I remain focused as a candidate.
All right, fair enough. Former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, and presidential candidate. Sir, thank you very much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Another 2020 candidate, former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke. Welcome back to Politics Nation, Mr. O'Rourke. First of all, your thoughts on how the impeachment inquiry will impact the Democratic race for the nominee.
It is so important that the country, through our representatives in Congress, focus on holding the president accountable and bringing him to justice. Otherwise, we're going to set this precedent that some people, because of their power or the position of public trust that they hold, are above the law. So though it might complicate things in the presidential race and in our elections and in the polling, it's the best thing that we could be doing. In fact, it's a very necessary thing if we're going to save this republic and hold Donald Trump accountable. So regardless of the politics, I'm grateful for those members of the House that are working on this, and even some Republican members who are beginning to show signs of courage to say the right thing, call what the president is doing by its right name. A quid pro quo is what Representative Rooney from Florida, Republican member, just said over the last couple of days. And then we hope that those Republican senators have the courage of their convictions, put this country over their party, and save this democracy while we still can. So it's the right thing for us to be focused on.
So you don't buy into those that say the impeachment inquiry could overshadow or take too much oxygen out of the room from the presidential campaign. You say that this is a matter of principle and it's a matter of saving the country.
That's right. I would probably concede the point as a candidate who's seen this, that it's much harder to break through, to become part of the conversation when we are gripped in the drama of a constitutional struggle. And yet, that struggle for the Constitution, ensuring that we can preserve this republic and pass it on to our kids and grandkids, that should take precedence over anything else, because any challenge that we want to meet on health care or criminal justice or rewriting our immigration laws or confronting climate change only becomes possible if this great democracy still works. And it is under attack right now, unlike any time in our lifetimes. And we've got to be up for this moment, make sure that we overcome this challenge. And I think everything else, including the politics, will work themselves out.
Now, how do you view the president, two-part question here, how do you view the president reversing on saying he's going to have the G7 conference at his hotel and resort, the Doral in Florida? Now he's saying he will not. And how do you deal with what is clearly in my opinion, empty 5-day ceasefire commitment from Turkey to Secretary Pompeo and Vice President Pence when we're seeing actual fighting going on?
You know, President Trump, perhaps inspired by Goebbels and the propagandists of the Third Reich, seemed to employ this tactic that the bigger the lie, the more obscene the injustice, the more dizzying the pace of this bizarre behavior, the less likely we are to be able to do something about it. And so I'm so grateful that not only is the House moving forward with impeachment, but that the public really began to rise up when the president sought to enrich himself by hosting the G7 summit at one of his own properties. This administration, rife with corruption, is finally coming to a reckoning with the public will of this country. So I think it's a good sign that he was caught, that he was stopped, that he can no longer normalize the behavior that we've seen so far. When it comes to Syria, this is just one of the most tragic, embarrassing moments in American history, to turn our backs on our allies. And Reverend Sharpton, I heard what you said earlier. These Kurdish fighters literally laid down their lives for this country and made it possible for us to send fewer U.S. service members over there to do the job of defeating ISIS and protecting our interests. So not only have we dishonored that commitment, we made it far less likely that we will be able to bring other potential allies in the future to our cause and to fight alongside U.S. service members. We've got to correct this injustice as soon as we can and reestablish the stature and standing and security of the United States on the global stage.
Did I hear you correctly say that perhaps he was influenced by Goebbels and the Third Reich in terms of telling a big lie? I just want to make sure that's what I heard you say.
That's right. There is so much that is resonant of the Third Reich in this administration, whether it is attempting to ban all people of one religion and saying that Muslims are somehow inherently dangerous or defective or disqualified. Outside of Nazi Germany, it's hard for me to find another modern democracy that had the audacity to say something like this. And then this idea from Goebbels and Hitler that the bigger the lie and the more often you repeat it, the more likely people are to believe it. That is Donald Trump to a T. The things that he says about immigrants committing crimes, being rapists, being predators and animals, seeking to dehumanize them. That's how we get them in cages. That's how we lost the lives of 7 children in our custody and care. Talking about African-American women duly elected by their constituents as somehow being less than American and telling them to go back to their own country. Or calling white supremacists and neo-Nazis and Klansmen very fine people. The signal that he is sending is being picked up by Americans who are willing to work on that hatred and racism. And Reverend Sharpton, we saw it brought home to us in El Paso on August 3rd when someone repeating the president's own words in his manifesto opened fire on people in El Paso, Texas, killing 22 of them in a Walmart on the Saturday before school started that next Monday. So this is the cost and consequence of Donald Trump.
All right, you clearly said it's Third Reich and like Goebbels. Let me go to another issue. You visited this week the family of Tatiana Jefferson, who was killed by a policeman in Fort Worth, Texas, a case that I'm certainly watching and interested in. Tell us about the experience and tell us why you decided to go, because I was a little disturbed that only Castro brought this shooting up at the debate, as I just brought to Senator Booker.
A week ago, Tay Jefferson was with her 8-year-old nephew in the bedroom of her own home when she was shot by a white police officer through her bedroom window. And as you well know, this is the second time a black person has been shot in the larger North Texas community by a white police officer in their own home. Both of them, Jean, shot last year, killed last year by Amber Geiger. And what Ashley and Amber, Tay's sisters, told me, and it really got me, is they said, look, Tay was not out. She was not at a friend's home. She wasn't doing anything to anyone. She was in the one place that should be safe for any human being, any American, and it was there that she was killed. And Amber and Ashley said, we just do not feel safe literally anywhere anymore. And for those in this country to feel fear from those who are sworn to serve and protect everyone in this country shows you just how dangerous America is for black women and black men today. And unless there's accountability, unless there is justice, this is going to continue to happen in America. So I am very grateful to Amber and Ashley for meeting with me, to Lee Merritt, who both represents this family and represented the family of Botham Jean, who's trying to bring light and justice to this situation so we don't continue to visit the same kind of injustice on future generations. This absolutely has to stop.
All right. Thank you, 2020 candidate Beto O'Rourke.